The light comes in low and gold across the valley, the kind of afternoon light that makes even ordinary things look staged. Rows of chayote vines climb bamboo trellises in tight green lines, leaves overlapping like shingles on a roof. Underneath them, fruit hangs pale and heavy, dozens to a row, hundreds to a field. Workers move between the rows with baskets. They handle each fruit like it's something borrowed. No bruised skin, no dropped stems. Every chayote goes into the basket the same careful way, and every basket gets set down the same careful way too. Outside the gate, a crowd has gathered that has no business being at a farm this size. Organic produce buyers in collared shirts, restaurant purchasing agents checking phones, a woman from a specialty grocery chain holding a clipboard against her chest like it might get taken from her. Some of them are holding signed contracts. One man keeps peeling bills off a roll of cash, recounting it, like the number might change if he checks again. A few of the farmers standing near the fence used to laugh about this place. They aren't laughing now, they're just watching. Arms folded, faces unreadable. One buyer raises his offer before anyone has said a word to him. The regional produce broker, a heavy-set man who spent 2 years telling anyone who'd listen that this whole operation was a joke, pushes toward the front of the line like he still has some claim to being first. She doesn't look up. She's standing near the harvest table, turning each chayote over in her hands, checking the skin, the stem, the weight. Nobody rushes her. Nobody dares to. A young inspector in a lab coat finishes running a handheld tester over a tray of samples, glances at the screen, and says quietly that every single one has cleared premium organic thresholds. The crowd goes still. 2 years earlier, none of these people would have crossed the road to look at this farm. 11 acres of tired soil on a slope too steep for machines, inherited from a family that had been farming it since before she was born. She lives there with her mother, a woman in her 70s who still remembers when almost every household in the valley grew something different, when nobody bought vegetables because everyone traded them instead. Her son works construction 2 provinces away. He calls on Sundays, he sends money when he can, which isn't often, and he always ends the call the same way, telling her not to work too hard. The soil on the slope has been tired for a long time. Fertilizer prices climb every season while the price farmers get for their crops barely moves. Neighboring families have already sold off parcels of land just to cover debts from the year before. She isn't like most of the other farmers on the slope, where they see a bad season and wait for a better one. She tends to ask why the season went bad in the first place. Neighbors call it stubbornness. Her mother calls it something closer to faith, though she says it with a worried look on her face. If the farm fails, there's no fallback plan. The land gets sold. Her mother, who has lived in the same house for 50 years, would have to move somewhere unfamiliar for whatever time she has left. The stories the family tells about this hillside, who planted which tree, who survived which flood, would stop having anywhere to live. The community around her is not unkind. They lend tools. They share labor during harvest. But almost every one of them believes the same thing, that farming success comes from having more land, not from doing something differently with less of it. Nobody on the slope has ever grown a climbing vegetable in a pot. Nobody sees why anyone would try. It starts with a gift, not a plan. An elderly neighbor hands her a single chayote fruit over the fence one morning, telling her it grows almost by itself if you treat it right. He doesn't explain what right means. He just tells her to try. She doesn't plant it in the ground. The ground on her slope has already disappointed her too many times. Instead, she finds an old plastic container behind the shed, fills it with compost she's been turning for months, packs mulch on top, and rigs a bamboo frame for the vine to climb. Total cost of the experiment, less than the price of a bag of rice. The vine takes to the container faster than anything she's grown in the ground. The fruit that comes off it is cleaner, less scarred, less prone to the rot that usually creeps in from the soil during the rainy months. Drainage that never worked on the slope suddenly isn't a problem at all. She repeats it. A second pot. A third. Each season she adjusts something small, spacing the containers further apart, rotating them to catch more sun, tightening how much water she gives and when. The improvements come in layers, and none of them feel like luck. Spacing the pots wider lets air move freely around the leaves, which cuts down on the mildew that plagues the ground-grown vines nearby. Moving containers gradually through the day chases the sun in a way a fixed row of plants never can. The compost she's been building for years, ignored by neighbors who buy cheap synthetic fertilizer instead, turns out to feed the roots in a way the tired hillside soil never could. Controlled watering, a little at a time, instead of flooding the rows, means almost nothing goes to waste. Harvest after harvest, the results hold steady. Not spectacular, just consistent, which on this hillside is its own kind of miracle. Her neighbors find out first, and they laugh. A woman growing climbing vegetables in plastic pots looks, to them, like someone who's given up on real farming and settled for a hobby. A few make the joke to her face. Most just make it behind her back. The local buyers won't touch what she's growing. Her harvests are too small to bother with, they tell her, not worth the trip out to collect. She sells what she can at the roadside for whatever price people will pay. Then the rains come. Heavy, sustained, the kind that flood the low fields and rot whatever's still in the ground. The traditional plots nearby are wrecked within days. Her containers survive without damage, raised off the waterlogged earth, but her total yield is still too small to matter to anyone watching from the outside. The regional produce broker hears about her setup and decides its worth, mocking publicly. He tells retailers in town that container farming is a gimmick, that it will never scale, that anyone who buys from her is wasting a relationship with a real supplier. Word travels fast in a valley this size. As the nearby crops fail, pests that would normally spread across a wider area start concentrating on whatever is still healthy. Her containers, being some of the only surviving green in the region, draw more attention from insects than she's prepared for. For a few weeks, it looks like the whole experiment might collapse. The hardest pressure isn't financial. It's her mother, sitting on the porch one evening, asking gently whether all this time spent on pots and compost is really worth it, whether they should just accept things as they are and stop chasing something that might not exist. She doesn't have a good answer that night. She just keeps watering the pots the next morning anyway. A chef from a small restaurant in town buys a few baskets almost as an afterthought, more out of curiosity than confidence. He notices the texture first, firmer than what he's used to, with none of the fibrous toughness that usually means overcooking. The size is uniform across the whole basket, fruit to fruit. The flavor is cleaner than anything he's been sourcing locally. He comes back the following week for more. Word passes to another chef, then to a small specialty grocer, who's been struggling to find a reliable, organic supplier for months. For the first time in 2 years, there's a version of the future that doesn't end in selling the land. Then the order comes in that changes the shape of everything. A buyer wants weekly deliveries at a volume several times larger than anything she's currently producing. It's the opportunity she's been waiting for, and it's also a problem she doesn't yet know how to solve. Scaling up without losing what makes the harvest different in the first place isn't something anyone has shown her how to do. If you've been enjoying this story so far, stories like this one about overlooked farming ideas, quiet resilience, and people who turn small experiments into something much bigger, consider subscribing so you don't miss what happens next. Because the real breakthrough is still ahead. Everything moves faster after that order lands. She needs hundreds of container systems built in a fraction of the time it took to build the first dozen, and every new pot has to perform the same way the original ones did. Consistency, not just volume, is what the buyer is actually asking for. Neighbors who laughed a season earlier start copying what they've seen, setting up their own containers without understanding the compost timing or the spacing that made hers work. Cheap imitations start showing up at local markets under vague claims of being container grown, muddying what she spent 2 years building. The broker, sensing his influence slipping, starts telling retailers that container-grown produce can't hold up over time, that any success she's had is a fluke that won't survive a real supply schedule. Then a drought settles over the region. Ground-grown crops everywhere start to struggle under it. Her irrigation, designed for containers, where every drop of water actually reaches the roots instead of draining into cracked earth, becomes the only thing standing between her and the same failure everyone else nearby is facing. There's a deadline now, too. The country's largest organic produce exhibition opens in 3 weeks, and if she can't demonstrate a reliable, scalable supply before then, the buyer's interest and the biggest opportunity of her life disappears with it. At some point, the story stops being about one farm and starts being about a question nobody has answered yet. Why does her harvest keep outperforming everyone else's season after season, when the fruit itself is the same species growing in the same valley? Agricultural researchers arrive to test what she's built. They check the soil biology inside the containers against the soil in the surrounding fields. They measure water retention, fruit density, nutrient content, shelf life after harvest. Old photographs of her earlier seasons get pulled out and compared against the current results, and the pattern holds across every one of them. The quality was never a single lucky batch. What the researchers find isn't one secret ingredient. It's the combination: container drainage working with compost maturity, spacing working with careful hand harvesting, each piece reinforcing the others rather than any one of them carrying the whole result on its own. The bigger question starts to form on its own, without anyone stating it out loud. If this works on 11 tired acres with almost no capital behind it, could it work for other small farmers stuck on land too poor or too limited to compete the traditional way? Back at the gate, the buyers are still waiting. Now the wait makes sense. The contracts in their hands aren't optimism. They're the result of 2 years of testing, of a drought survived, of a method that held up under exactly the kind of pressure that broke everyone else's harvest. The care she takes checking each chayote by hand isn't caution born of doubt. It's the same habit that built the reputation these buyers are now competing to be part of. Even the broker pushing toward the front of the line makes sense now. The man who spent 2 years telling people this farm would fail is standing in line behind people he used to be able to control, hoping there's still a way in. The largest buyer at the gate isn't there for a one-time harvest. Their representative says it plainly. They don't just want her vegetables. They want her system. Independent lab results, the same ones the young inspector confirmed earlier, show her container method producing fruit with far more consistent quality and noticeably less post-harvest loss than what most conventional suppliers in the region can deliver. The broker, still standing near the back of the crowd, is now in the position of competing against the very method he spent 2 years dismissing. What becomes clear in that moment isn't that she grew good chayote. It's that she built something repeatable, something that doesn't depend on luck, on land, or on capital most small farmers will never have access to. 2 offers arrive within days of each other. One company wants exclusive rights to everything she produces going forward, a deal that would secure her family's future in a way that seemed unthinkable 2 years ago. A cooperative of small farmers from across the region asks for something different, to be taught the method instead, so their own struggling plots might have a chance at the kind of stability she's found. She has to choose between the offer that protects her own future and the one that shares what she's built with people standing exactly where she stood 2 years earlier. In the months that follow, the farm becomes something the family no longer has to worry about losing. Her mother, who once questioned whether any of this was worth the years it took, watches buyers return season after season and stops asking the question. Her son visits more often now, and some of those visits turn into staying an extra week to help build new container frames. Neighboring families, the same ones who once laughed at pots on a hillside, start adapting the method to their own small plots, adjusting it to whatever land and resources they actually have. The broker, still working the same region, is no longer in a position to decide whose harvest gets taken seriously. Early morning, the light not yet gold, just gray and soft over the slope. She fills a single inexpensive pot with fresh compost, backing it down the same way she did the first time. A child, her son's daughter, sets a new chayote fruit into the soil and presses it in with both hands. The camera holds on the pot a moment longer than it needs to. 2 years ago, this was where the whole story started. $5, one container, and a woman willing to try something nobody around her believed in. It's still where it starts,